Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining our weekly podcast. I'm Robin Lewis, founder and CEO of the Robin Report, which, by the way, is much more than a daily report. It really is a knowledge platform from which we communicate thought leadership on various strategic topics. Yes, through the daily reports, but also these podcasts. And we do webinars, and we will probably start doing live events maybe later in the year. Anyway, along with our chief strategist, Shelley Kohan, also, by the way, a professor at Fashion Institute of Technology, we welcome you to our conversation on the topic of chasing the possibility of predicting recessions. Well, Shelley, a quick two-word answer, it's impossible, at least verified by the last so-called Great Recession and all of those before it. I mean, give me a break. All the best and brightest economists, I don't know, financiers, consultants, academicians, so-called experts, and any other kind of futurist, and even the Fed itself have not been able to predict, or better, to stop the declining and totally unpredictable recessions we have had. A couple of very wry answers. One famous economist said it's a million things driving our GDP down, of which the National Bureau of Economic Research in the United States often considers a recession to be a period of at least 2 consecutive quarters, 6 months, of declining GDP, of which, by the way, personal spending accounts for 70.8% of our GDP.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, I know we keep saying this, but people lose sight of that. And and GDP is averaging between 19 and 22 trillion dollars annually. Yes, that's a T for trillion. So retail is the big fat canary in the coal mine. So the GDP moves slowly downward, and then bang, it happens very fast. Being announced on the morning news when you wake up and listen to this, we might have been in a recession even before you woke up to the news that morning. So Shelley, it really is complicated, and I'm amazed we're taking this on as a subject, but I think we know a few things about it. And by the way, and that's why even the best and the brightest can't explain its arrival. So I also want to paraphrase an interview quote from CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, answering a question by his son, who during the 2008 recession asked his father, what's a recession? So Jamie Dimon replies to his son, it's something that happens about every 10 years. Huh. My take on that was that the best and the brightest, Jamie Dimon, knew if he even started on that, to define it, it would be a Herculean task that would most likely result in his son being even further confused. To say nothing of Dimon himself not wanting to go down a further complex rabbit hole. So Shelley, our purpose today is not to define recession and certainly not to predict one.
Thankfully.
Yeah, but you know, I think simply to try to clarify out of all the noise, the most important dynamics to track, and particularly those of consumer spending and retail. As I said, 70% drives the GDP number. And since Walmart has often been used as a bellwether, or better said, the biggest canary in the coal mine, welcoming about 265 million visitors per week in their US stores. They just had a recent analyst meeting that was really quite positive. The financial results alone measure a good quarter for them. But I think CEO Doug McMillan's observations of what the numbers may mean regarding recession indications are more important. So, Shelley, can you give us a quick review of the financials on Walmart?
Sure, Robin, I can do that. But before I do that, I just want to remind our listeners, since consumers drive everything, and particularly the GDP and all of retail, including Walmart, I'm just going to give some context before I get into the actual numbers themselves.
Okay.
And let me also say this: the only certainty in retail is consumer uncertainty.
Very good. Yeah.
Right? We
Yeah.
cannot predict what consumers will do. And quite frankly, consumers can't even predict their own behavior. So according to the Michigan Survey of Consumer Confidence Index that we look at, confidence dropped actually 9.1% this month compared with April. And also, as reported in WWD, the consumers are worried that the economic downturn will not be brief. This is by Joanna Sue, who's the director of the surveys of consumers. And throughout the current inflationary episode, consumers have shown resiliency under strong labor markets, but their anticipation, this dark cloud that's hovering over them, of a recession will lead them to pull back when they see signs of weakness emerging. So, you know, if policymakers fail to resolve the debt ceiling, which is the big topic these days, some of the dismal views over the economy will exasperate the dire economic consequences of default. This is what Sue is saying. So yes, the Michigan survey is always helpful directionally, but it's not precise. And on top of inflation issues in consumers, also they're haunted every day by the debt that they're incurring. They're also get this bombardment. It's 24/7. I mean, news flashes on their cell phones, all over the news, social media, on how, on all this, you know, disinformation about what's happening. Broadcast networks, social media, all of it. And it just seems so dire, and it seems like it's just all bad news.
Yeah.
You know, the war, environmental fears, domestic and global geopolitical train wrecks, fear of losing jobs, fear of being gunned down, bank failures, health failures, post-pandemic shifts in behavior. And I'm sure there's many more issues that consumers are really just trying to adopt their lives around. And they have a lot of anxiety. So, and because of herd mentality often sets in, the economy could crash fast and deep. So sorry, but I think we needed just a tad bit of context there.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was very well put, Shelley. Thanks. And by the way, I will add another big squeeze on consumers. The New York Federal Reserve reported that total consumer debt has hit a record $17 trillion in the first quarter this year. And while credit card debt was roughly steady at 986 billion, it stood out because it usually declines in the first quarter. And, you know, as an aside, I would say that a big reason for the credit card debt not declining in the first quarter is due to the BNPL phenomenon, buy now, pay later. There is a large scale of defaulting among younger consumers whose eyes simply are bigger than their stomachs. So then there's the commercial real estate market. Oh my God. And an 11.5 trillion mortgage debt coming due for repayment in 2025. Unbelievable. Many experts are predicting that because of no clarity on where interest rates are going, on top of the fact that work from home has essentially established an in-office work week of like, Tuesday through Thursday, the pundits are saying we are seeing the very real threat of another 2008 type real estate collapse.
Wow.
Well, yeah, only this time it will be driven by commercial real estate versus residential, although Residential's not doing too well either. There's no inventory out there, and people don't want to buy it now anyway because the mortgage rates are too high. So it's a real conundrum. And another unknown has to do, with a kind of herd psychology's impact on recession, which you touched on. When your neighbor is having a tough time financially, you believe we're in a recession. When you are having a tough time, we're in a depression, right? So herd mentality and the definition of recession, are really individual psychological states of mind. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, if enough consumers pull back enough from spending, we do face recession. So, Shelley, back to the biggest canary in the mine.
Well, Walmart just had its first quarter sales release, and sales are up, Robin, get this, 7.6%.
Yeah.
To nearly 151 billion. And that's adding 11 billion to their top line growth from a year ago. And they had strong results last year. The US division in particular, when you look at comp sales, comparable sales, they jumped 7.4%. This includes fuel. Transactions were up almost 3%, and the average ticket, Robin, was up 4.4%.
Wow.
So they're spending more money per trip. And get this, Robin, this is the best number out there. The US division's e-commerce, so Walmart's e-commerce division, which carries, get this, more than 200 million apparel stock keeping units.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
They grew, you got to sit down for this one. Guess what they grew in the first quarter? 27%.
Wow.
It's
incredible.
Unbelievable. So CEO McMillan said on the analyst call, and he's right. He said, it's a great time to be a really good merchant. And Robin, that's certainly a breath of fresh air, no pun intended. But being a good merchant right now is working for a lot of the retailers.
Yeah, Shelley, and it also points to the fact that we have very few of those really good merchants, right? And of course, the Walmart model is to offer value-based goods by the tonnage at lowest everyday prices. That in tough economic times maintains its current loyalists while attracting new consumers, and it attracts higher income consumers who simply want to save some money. So McMillan added in the interview, he said, like in our stores, when I think about general merchandise, whether that's apparel or hard lines, we're focusing our store leadership and our store associates on standing tall in those areas. And because inventory is in a better spot than it was last summer, for example, they can focus more on that rather than just dealing with the flow of inventory that was coming in. In short, this point suggests the retailer was both seeing more shoppers than it was a year ago, and that those shoppers were spending more money. But Shelley, even though they are the biggest canary and maybe the chirpiest in success in the first quarter, it could swing south very fast for a million reasons. It's just that McMillan and team seem to know how to proactively pivot and pivot quickly, right? So when they see changes in consumer behavior, there's that word agility again. In my opinion, they are among the best, if not the best.
Yeah, and let me just add that Walmart's not the only canary in the coal mine. So Amazon sales were up 9%, and Costco, which they don't report their quarterly sales, Q3 is reporting this week. They're on a different financial calendar, but in April, they reported sales. They were up 3% for April, and year to date through 35 weeks, they're up 5.6%. And these are examples of being great merchants. McMillan is absolutely right. And we know product is king in our world. So, and here's one more little canary chick, certainly not the biggest retailer out there, but this company is certainly making a huge waves this year. And we did a podcast on it, Robin, called Abercrombie and Fitch, the meteoric
Oh,
rise
yeah.
back to cool. Let me
Yeah.
say right now, they are on fire. The company
Wow.
delivered decade high first quarter sales, 14% up for the Abercrombie brands. So to say that Fran Horowitz and her team has turned that business around is a great understatement. No,
Mhm.
seriously, they have really pegged their target market and they're delivering the products that they want in a unified manner. And the other thing Fran Horowitz said, who's the CEO, obviously, she said on an interview that, you know, a lot of it has to do with their ability to pivot. They got merchandise flowing, like you just
Yeah.
mentioned, Robin, and
Yep.
they're able to more quickly pivot alongside the consumer. So, and not to drone on and on and on, but Yeti, which is a similar kind of brand to Abercrombie and Fitch in terms of size of the business, unique value proposition, unparalleled marketing, and again, another great merchant just delivered 3% sales increase with direct to consumer sales up 7%. I'm sure when Ulta Beauty reports this week, I don't have those numbers because they literally report later today, actually. So we have, you know, these brands that are delivering on the consumer and providing this kind of unified commerce. And as much as we keep hearing about a slowdown of spending, I'm just not seeing it with some brands that have really mastered this ability to pivot alongside the customers.
Yeah.
You know, and these trends were reflected by the latest results in sales. So sales actually went up in April slightly as compared to March. And if you look year over year, they're ahead 1.6% year over year for the month of April. So yes, you do have some categories
Yeah.
that are being hit with the consumer pullback, like the home improvement. So Home Depot sales declined 4.2% in the first quarter. Lowe's also reported comparable store sales decrease of 4.3%. But remember, Robin, a lot of these sales decreases for home improvement are driven by two major factors. One, deflation. So the cost of lumber going down has negatively impacted the revenue.
Yeah.
And lower do-it-yourself discretionary sales. So ironically, deflation actually hurt the revenue for home improvement.
Yeah. You know, there you have it again. You know, you got the winners and you got the losers. It's just the winners, I think, in this cycle are not as big of winners as they may have been in the past cycles, because it is slowing down the economy. Anyway, it's not a pretty picture. And then there is the inventory conundrum. Telsey and advisory group analysts found that across segments, inventory growth averaged at 46% in Q2 last year in apparel and e-commerce, and that figure was considerably higher at 65.6% for both sectors. And Shelley, that's another issue that has to be managed, again, with great agility. While Walmart was able to adjust in the first quarter, the company's chief financial officer, John David Rainey, emphasized just how dramatically shoppers are changing right now. He said, at the headline level, consumer spending has proven resilient, but below the surface, we continue to see signs that customers remain choiceful. Interesting word, particularly in discretionary categories. In Q1, we saw a nearly 360 basis point shift in the U.S. sales mix from general merchandise to grocery and health and wellness. He goes on to say, to benchmark the magnitude of this shift exceeds the 330 basis points of category mix shift we experienced in all of last year. That kind of a swing at a company as large as Walmart, you know, with the last quarter alone outpacing a year of consumer shifts, shows just how fast change is sweeping through the retail industry, Shelley. And, you know,
Mm.
Neil Sanders, by the way, described the current landscape as a cost of living crisis. That is acting as a recruiting sergeant for Walmart, increasing customer numbers. This includes among higher income shoppers, more of whom are now using Walmart on a regular basis for groceries and household goods. Sanders said, the good news here is that new shoppers seem to be sticking with Walmart, at least for the time being. But the less good news is that their activity is mostly confined, to staples and necessities, and few are crossing the aisle to shop general merchandise. Anyway, in our view, improvements to the proposition, including stocking more aspirational brands in areas like beauty and strong online service levels, have really helped with the retention of higher income consumers. So, Shelley, do we hear or read any good news?
Well, let me just say this, Robin. You know who's going to change that consumer from stepping over the aisle into fashion? Denise Incandelo's is working very hard and has really put Walmart on the map in terms of being looked and viewed at as, fashion.
Yep.
It's never had that in the past. So
totally.
And I think that, experts that focus more squarely on the consumer saw some shoppers that are still willing to spend despite all the economic angst that the consumers are feeling. So Katie Thomas, who leads the Kearney Consumer Institute think tank, said, to me, the stability in these numbers is actually a good thing. So especially after all the doom and gloom we've seen about the consumer, there's actually not this panic over money and inflation. So the leveling off is what she's talking about, not these big, dips and dives. But she also said that people are kind of living their lives and they're really thinking they've actually gotten to incredibly savvy about decisions that they're going to make, similar to what the CFO at Walmart said about choiceful, right?
Yeah.
She's also saying the same thing in terms of that. And she also said something that was really interesting. She said that many of the experts are looking at the consumer through a financial lens of Wall Street. So what their spending means for stock prices instead of looking at the consumers actually themselves. So the consumer is evolving. And she added that, you've just seen 2 years of stabilization in retail sales figures. And she personally would be more concerned if we saw the, huge increases and then, substantial decreases. So she actually thinks how we're moving along at this steady pace is actually very positive. And there really hasn't been a massive pullback in spending that we've now, I think we've been talking about this for a year, right?
Yep.
So at what point do we move beyond that story? That's her question. At what point are we going to go away from this big, massive pullback of consumer spending? So that doesn't mean the changes in spending patterns aren't impacting companies or stock prices. It just might say more about the companies themselves and where they're situated in the market and how their model is, and if they're able to adapt to these consumer shifting attitude changes. So as luxury gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and the economic concerns are pushing more shoppers to the value chain. So those high income shoppers going to Walmart as an example of that. The space in between has only gotten trickier. So brands really need to stand out in some way. So she says, we've been talking about this since the pandemic, the idea of the death of the middle. The middle has gotten mushy by trying to be everything to everyone, and they've gotten nothing to anybody. I love that quote.
Yeah.
So I don't know how positive all that was, Robin, but you and I have talked about this hollowing out of the so-called middle class for a long time. So recession aside, consumers have been really opening up their wallets in a value sector. And even in the luxury class is finding treasures in that sector as well.
Oh boy, so full circle, right? Predicting a recession is impossible. I guess all we can close with, Shelley, is that we don't even know all of the unknowns, just like most everything in life.
Well, Robin, we could keep predicting it for the next 6 months, and over the last year and a half, at some point, we're going to be right.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, you can find more of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and theronreport.com. Look for us on YouTube, where we broadcast our podcast as well. And please follow us on social media. Link in with us for the latest thoughts about the industry.
And I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. And once again, if any of you have a topic that you would like Shelley and I to cover, just send me an email to Robin at therobinreport.com. And thanks very much again for joining us.